What they don't tell you about traveling back in time is that you actually can't change fate. Everything is predestined by some scientific constant, or God, or something even less explainable. All you can do is create a new tributary that branches out for a while before inevitably ending up in the same spot. Like a damned river snaking its way back to the same day. And the other thing they don't tell you is that each time you try to fix it, it just gets worse. If your younger brother was killed on impact in a car wreck, the next time he'd end up pinned between the two vehicles, bleeding out. Then, after you stop him from getting in a vehicle, period, on vacation, he'll be swept away by the riptide, bobbing in the distance until he disappears into the water. Maybe next he'll be hospitalized when the hotel catches fire. And after 3 days of infected third-degree burns, he'll unremarkably slip away. It keeps going like that. And the trouble is, you just keep trying because the pain only deepens. How could it get any worse? And yet, you'll still be surprised. You'll see him shot point blank by a spree shooter, begging for his life. And you'll obsess over the blind terror that your kid brother must have felt. Until you go back one more time, only this time maybe he just goes missing. And the unknown is somehow worse for you. You'll lose yourself hoping that maybe this time, if you made just one tweak, that you'd be able to get it right. Not that you'll save his life. You'll have given up on that by now. But maybe you'll go at least a few iterations back. To the wreck, to the ocean, to the flame, to the execution. Because by then, you'll just want less pain. And the thing they don't tell you about time travel is that this just goes on. That you will know that you should quit pumping quarters into a rigged slot machine. But you've already gone too far. The house always wins. That's the thing they don't tell you. That grief eats away at everything. Except a hope that you're important enough to get what you wanted.
Hello, my name is Max Stewart, and I'm the percussionist with our contemporary ensemble at the University of Houston. And I'm joined today by the author, Brendan Stevens, author/musician. He wrote the poem, What They Don't Tell You About Traveling Back in Time, that accompanies the piece that you just listened to. And Brendan, I was really curious, when I was working on this piece, how you came up with the idea for this poem, because it's a really interesting story that it tells, and it kind of gives you a different approach to kind of grieving, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this was an interesting one. I feel like with most of the time with writing, I feel like there's always like a battle where, like, often you write the piece and then you're only trying to really explore kind of the germ of an idea, and then through like subsequent revisions, it kind of you find out what it actually is. This piece kind of came pretty quick and pretty easily. Yeah, it was just it came with the idea of I mean, well, almost starting with the first line, like the idea that if time travel were possible, but you couldn't change anything, what would that be like? And then just kind of think, well, what if the paradox was that things get worse rather than you're just replaying the same thing? So then it's like, when would you stop? When would you give up in order to grieve? And so, yeah, it was an interesting piece for me, just because, yeah, I'm primarily a fiction writer. And so the fact that this piece is like doesn't really have, I mean, there is a character and a character arc, but it's kind of hidden and kind of obscured by that, like, let me just propose a scenario to you, like kind of voice. So that's kind of how it came out, and it came out really, really like very similar to what it is now. Maybe, I mean, certainly I tinkered with the sentences, but not with the grand overall approach. And then thankfully, whenever it got paired by Dr. Smith, who composed this beautiful piece for it. So it was so great. Yeah, I'm very pleased with how it turned out.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why it's so effective is because it's kind of simple and straightforward. You know, there's it's not too complex or intense or anything, or I mean, it is intense, but it's pretty straightforward, and I think that it helps sell the idea a lot.
And I also wonder a little bit, one of the reasons I think that this piece might be effective, especially when paired with music, is that the fact that it doesn't have a strong, like character arc, or like here is my thing, where if you're focusing too much on the music, you might not be able to fully resonate with the character. Whereas this was kind of I think a really strong pairing, but just it's also a short piece, a good short story sometimes can, take 30-40 minutes to read out loud. But it's about the emotionality of this piece, which pairs well with music, so that you can kind of get lost in kind of a dreaminess of it. I think that it works with it.
I definitely agree with that. So another thing I was wondering, because I know you've done other collaborations with musicians as a writer, and I was wondering what your approach as a writer is to working with musicians.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm endlessly happy that I've kind of stumbled into this, because I have a background in music, so I always wanted to figure out how I could pair the two, and I kind of figured out pretty early on that, like, me composing my own music while trying to read just doesn't work. And so it all kind of fell into place by happenstance. And it's interesting because I've done 4 projects kind of recently, and they've all been totally different. I can kind of just talk a little bit about each without going into too much detail, but the first was this piece we talked about, and with that, I had a piece ready to go. So when Dr. Smith was pairing the aura performance with writers, he just kind of threw it out and said, does anyone have a piece that you would like something to be written for? And I was just like, please, me. That sounds exactly like what I want. I would love to do that. I had this piece. It was pretty short. It's a little different, and it just worked out perfectly. So I kind of gave a complete piece. And then with the performance element, we kind of just talked about, like, where, because there is some, like, playing around with the drummer of, like, okay, when to build up the intensity, when to transition to this next part, how long should I hold between paragraphs. But that was an interesting one because I presented a completed piece. The next one was with the Resilient Sounds, which was with the Houston Symphony, and I was paired with the Kyle Riviera. And that was interesting because Kyle had interviewed a refugee, and with that, he then composed an entire piece. And then I was kind of late to the game in the stage where that piece had already been written. And I was told, here's the interview that I had with the refugee here, and here is my piece. We would like for you to kind of mesh these two together with something. And so with that one, we chose to do more of a projection. I didn't want to take away from the music by going up there and reading. I think, and so we had a projection of a series of poems that followed the movements of this piece. So that was almost the reverse.
Yeah.
Then I worked with a composer to produce a piece for the Houston Brass Quintet, and that was very interesting because that composer wanted me to basically be there every step of the way. And so I would write something and then he would compose off of that, but then also be like, I actually changed some things and I want for you to play around with this. So there was a lot of revision, a lot of throwing out ideas. It was more collaborative. And the most recent was, again, with Ara, was Haunted, which was, Dr. Smith, again, approached me and asked if I wanted to be involved and to write a play, some monologues to go along to make a cohesive story for the entire concert. So there was a full narrative arc and everything there. And again, that was it was kind of in between. I wrote a little bit more like kind of on my own, and then those pieces were presented to the two Houston composers that wrote original pieces to it. But then also there were a few of the monologues that got paired with a specific contemporary American composition that Dr. Smith just felt like this really speaks to this. It inspired me this way. So I guess the short answer is that I've had to approach it a bunch of different ways, and there's no one way that really works, at least so far that I've found.
Yeah, that's great. And I remember seeing the Haunted concert. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
At the time. So what some people might not know about you, I mean, they might be able to guess by all the instruments behind you, is that you have a pretty heavy music background, and you also are a part of a rock band named Overa.
Yes.
And I listened to some of y'all's music. It's really cool. Really interesting. They're on Bandcamp if you guys want to check them out. And I was wondering where the name Overo comes from. How did y'all come up with that idea?
Yeah. So Overo is really just a pattern for a certain horse pattern of like where having white spots in certain places and brown in other places. So it's, when we were coming up with the band name, we had we wanted something that was original. We didn't want to have to be like, on Bandcamp or Spotify being like, I don't know. I'm sure if you like the Ace of Spades 33 or something like that, having like 50 versions. So we were like, we want a name that if we just type in the name .bandcamp.com, it's we can claim it. And then just the music that we are doing, it's a subgenre of punk and hardcore and emotional, like emo type of music, which it kind of lends itself a little bit more to being able to choose a band name that's kind of evocative or something that even if you don't quite know what it means, that doesn't really change things. We're not trying to like get out ahead and be like, like a metal band might have a name that's like really in your face. You hear it and you're like, that's metal. We wanted something that was a little bit that sounded poetic, and even if no one knew what it meant, it would just the kind of the rhythm and the interestingness of the word Overo kind of would convey something, even if they don't know what it means.
Well, it's a great band name, and it's a really intriguing name.
Mhm.
It definitely pulls the listener in, I think.
Yeah.
So the last thing I have to ask you is just what are you working on now?
Yeah, I'm in the last year of my PhD at University of Houston. So I'm currently working on the novel that's going to serve as my dissertation and hopefully end up being a published novel. Kind of magical realism in some ways, but yeah, it's a much longer piece. It's a traditional novel following multiple characters and everything.
Oh, that sounds
Um,
amazing.
Musically, yeah, Overa has recorded some new music, and so we're getting ready to put out we're in the mixing phase of
Yeah.
a new full length album and have a couple other split tracks and stuff. And I always try to write some solo stuff as well. So yeah, I've been busy,
Yeah.
just trying to keep my mind occupied. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Max.
Yeah, no problem.